Hello, everyone. Pastor Howie here with another edition of Readings and Thoughts from the Scriptures as we go through the book of Acts, the history book of the New Testament, the history book of the founding of New Testament churches and the ways and means of how to be a church in some sense, and the power of God to overcome all adversarial opposition to the spread of the gospel. And we're in the midst of one of those things in chapter 22, verses 22 through 29, because we are in the midst of the Apostle Paul defending himself and identifying himself and standing firm in the midst of being falsely accused of doing things that he did not do, and falsely accused of being a usurper and an enemy to Rome, and in danger, literally, of being tried, persecuted, and executed as a usurper without a fair hearing. So in Acts chapter 21, this all began with Paul's arrest in Jerusalem and being taken, a mob, because a mob rose up and was disrupting the enforced peace of Rome, the Pax Romana. And so the Roman soldiers came to see what was going on, and they saw Paul being beaten by the Jews, who were totally against him because of the false accusations. Consequently, he gets arrested. He is arrested because he is the center of this controversy. Therefore, the Roman centurion thought that he may have been, or the Roman guard thought he was the cause of this whole riot. So he's arrested. He gets a chance to address the crowd, and that happens at the end of chapter 21 and extends into the first 21 chapters of chapter 22. Again, where the people who put in the chapter divisions and the verses in our scriptures that we're so familiar with, they didn't exist when Luke wrote this account, and so it's kind of interrupted a little bit. But as we come to chapter 22, verse 22, the Apostle Paul is continuing his defense and his testimony. This time, of course, he's going to be speaking to the Roman guard who's about to whip him as if he were a common criminal and not what he identifies himself with in this passage, Paul, the Roman citizen. Paul was a Jew. He was a dedicated and zealous follower of the law. He was a member of the Sanhedrin, but he was also a Roman citizen. So here we go, Acts 22, 22 through 29. The crowd listened to Paul until he said this. And what is it he said? He was simply giving his testimony of how God stopped him on his way to Damascus, converted him, and commissioned him to go preach the gospel to Jews and also as far as into the Gentile world. And so the crowd that was heavily prejudiced against anything to do with Jews having relationships with the Gentiles listened to Paul until he said this. Then they raised their voices and shouted, "Rid the earth of him, he's not fit to live." That's how strong their prejudice against the Gentile world was. As they were shouting and throwing off their cloaks and flinging dust into the air, can you just picture this? The commander ordered that Paul be taken into the barracks. He directed that he be flogged and interrogated. The flogging comes first, and then the interrogation. Flogged and interrogated in order to find out why the people were shouting at Paul, at him like this. As they stretched him out to flog him, Paul said to the centurion standing there, "Is it legal for you to flog a Roman citizen who hasn't even been found guilty?" When the centurion heard this, he went to the commander and reported it. "What are you going to do?" he replied. "This man is a Roman citizen." The commander went to Paul and asked, "Tell me, are you a Roman citizen?" "Yes, I am," he answered. Then the commander said, "I had to pay a lot of money for my citizenship." "But I was born a citizen," Paul replied. Those who were about to interrogate him withdrew immediately. The commander himself was alarmed when he realized he had put Paul, a Roman citizen, in chains. The commander is alarmed because he had broken the law. And by breaking the law, even though he had done it without knowing that Paul was a Roman citizen, he still broke the law. He could be executed. The soldiers that were going to flog Paul could have been executed. So this is how strong the Roman Empire regarded those who were free-born Roman citizens. They were privileged above everybody else except the emperor himself. This Roman centurion was not a Roman citizen to begin with. He wasn't born a Roman citizen. He had to pay for it. Paul didn't. And so, in the providence of God, this very zealous persecutor of the church is converted by Christ and becomes a very zealous proponent of the gospel, even to the Gentile nations, fulfilling what God had always intended for Abraham's descendants to do. They were to be a light to the nations. They failed, and they were failing here. So prejudiced against anyone having anything to do with the Gentiles that they were willing to kill Paul or demand his execution of the Romans, like they demanded Christ's execution. But God in his providence raises up Paul, who is a Roman citizen. Therefore, he is automatically under the protection of Rome. So that ultimately, the Jews who despise him and want Paul to be executed can't touch him. Even the Roman commander can't touch him. And so the saga continues. But isn't it interesting how people are placed in the right place at the right time to fulfill God's plans? And that includes you and me and all our brothers and sisters in Christ. We are representatives of Christ, followers of Christ, in fulfillment of God's plan. And as we have conversations with people, as we help people, as we have compassion for people, as we answer questions about the hope that is within us, as we take opportunities to introduce people to the Jesus we believe in, we are like Paul. We are the people raised up by God at the right time, in the right place, to the glory of God. That's what I leave you to think about on this day, and may God bless you.